Hello, denizens. With the recent Star Trek Section 31 miscarriage, the usual suspects rightfully came out and assailed this most recent Star Trek parody. As I have posted many videos about this debacle, the moment Star Trek Discovery leaked out of our televisions like the Love Canal toxic waste spill, I don't need to repeat all that here again. Besides, this video is going to end on a very positive, hopeful note, so please stay tuned. While I'm far from being a Trek nerd, I never bought the Enterprise Blueprint book. I did watch the original series as they aired. I went to Toronto's first Star Trek convention at the Royal York Hotel, and I own several bits of Trek memorabilia, DVDs, and VHSs, including my favorite, the original version of The Cage. I say this only to indicate that I am nowhere near as immersed as my friend Robert Meyer Burnett, who wrote and directed Free Enterprise, one of my favorite movies. But it was Robert, during a recent Film Threat free-for-all, who mentioned, here it is, the book The Making of Star Trek by Stephen E. Whitfield by way of Gene Roddenberry, first published in 1968. I actually recalled the book, but never bought it. I was 14 and I was buying Marvel comics and books about nuclear physics. Anyway, Robert's mention tweaked my curiosity, as I love reading production books. I mean, if you want the finest document about creating comedy during the golden age of Broadway, I suggest Act 1 by Moss Hart. It is inspiring and brilliant. Finally, okay, I'm going to get to my point. My point is that the making of Star Trek, this thing here, is a revelation that any of you fans out there depressed with the present state of the franchise should read for several reasons. It will transport you back to 1966 in a way that even watching the original doesn't. Did you know the Talosians, the big veiny, brain-headed people in the cage, were originally supposed to be crab creatures that clicked their claws? What it does more than anything is show the thinking, the groundwork and motivation that went into Star Trek. It shows the process, the problems, the solutions vis-a-vis budgets and network objections. It also amply illustrates how much of the original world building was dispensed with from the J.J. Abrams era onward. I'm certain not a single person in charge of those movies and TV shows read The Making of Star Trek. I do know of people who questioned continuity issues in the Toronto-produced Discovery, who were subsequently fired for such transgressions. That isn't to say I didn't have issues with post-TOS Treks. Next Gen bothered me with its spacious bridge. No new gear porn to speak of, though it had its logical extensions such as the clip-on, communicator. Little thought went into how people managed personal time in the 24th century. Everyone was reading books. What? There was no TV shows or video games in the future? And don't get me started on that stupid holodeck. What saved TNG were the character relationships, the acting, and some truly brilliant stories stuffed between many mediocre ones. But the allegorical stories were pretty much gone. Still, I loved the series. DS9 was not a favorite, even less innovative gear porn-wise. Look, putting giant rubber ears on someone is not science fiction. It got better when Babylon 5 aired and DS9 seemed to get goosed by the competition. But for me, Babylon was the more entertaining show with better world building. Voyager did not grab me. I distinctly recall thinking how excessively diverse it was, even back then. But once again, where were the updates to systems and equipment? Sorry to harp on this, but wasn't one of the joys of TOS the gear porn? The phaser, the communicator, the original tablet computer, photon torpedoes, food replicator, warp drive, deflector shields, tricorder, needle-free injections, the transporter, the sick bay's biofunction monitor with its boom, 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 and let's not forget the Jeffries tube. Of course, there was the Enterprise itself. After decades of sci-fi movies and TV shows featuring pointy, rocket ships with flames and smoke coming out of its rear end, or flying saucers hanging from strings, we saw this giant disc attached to a cantilevered body and two long pods sticking out, perched on thin posts, delicate and substantial at the same time, and it remains iconic to this day. The fact that it was designed for series television, in that it was a battleship that could hold 430 people, it meant that you didn't have to land on a planet to have a story. The ship already had 430 potential stories on board that could be tapped. It's the same reason they put Mary Tyler Moore in the same apartment building with Rhoda and Phyllis. Because of its solid internal logic, other iconic things organically evolved that we associate with the show, such as Spock's, live long and prosper gesture and the neck pinch. Oh, sorry, just kidding. Whose origins I won't go into here, but Nimoy invented these elements that became unique to Vulcan world building. The logical improvisation could only have happened with the solid foundation Roddenberry laid. The other reason I suggest you get a copy of the book is because after reading it, I actually do believe the Star Trek universe can be resurrected without much difficulty. I kind of felt the show had already started to stray with TNG. I know this is heretical, but I believe it to be true. Then DS9 strayed further, and Voyager, the most of all. I hate to say it, but the Rick Berman era opened the gateway to the trash we've gotten since. Though just how wretched Kurtzman Trek turned out, no one could have predicted, with Section 31 being the rancid icing on that cake. In its day, I did get the sense that Enterprise was an attempt to turn back the clock, a return to the promise of the original. Here, in this book, is everything one would need. Bringing it back to life isn't the right term. I would say just doing it right. Star Trek, at its core, is a very positive story about the future, where most social ills are fixed, where we are not preoccupied by race and sexual orientation. It looks outward, not inward. Here's a quote by Gene Kuhn, a producer on Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry created a totally new universe. He invented a starship which works, by the way, and is a logical progression from what we know today. He created customs, morals, modes of speaking, a complete technology. We have a very rigid technology on the show. We know how fast we can go. We know what we use for fuel. We know what our weapons will do. And Gene invented all of these things. He did a monumental job of creation. He created an entire galaxy and an entire rule book for operating within that galaxy, with very specific laws governing behavior, manners, customs, as well as science and technology. Now, that's a hell of a job. He didn't create a show, he created a universe, and it works well. This was a massive, titanic job of creation. One of the most impressive feats of its kind that I've ever seen. You can submit our ships or our technology or anything you want to NASA, and they will say, well, it's pretty far out, but I don't see why it shouldn't work. Nobody can tell us that it's scientifically impossible or that it won't work. Now, does that describe Discovery in any way, shape, or form? Not even close. Could you imagine creating something for a modern audience that an old, straight, white guy came up with? Heavens, where's the identity politics? But the good news, as I've said, is that it's all here, I don't think it's hard at all. Stupid people have made us think it's hard. Your thoughts are appreciated. Till next time, denizens, be seeing you. Oh, sorry.